joins us every second week, and today he has decided to come right here to Val. No telephone calls, no Zoom links, right here with us, and we're hoping that he is going to. I'm hoping that the knowledge being next to you is going to somehow be transmitted from this chair that he is sitting on right here onto me. So it is time for our weekly update on business, finance, and economic news. Leslie Fisher, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shabalala. Good evening to you and your listeners.
Good evening. What do you have for us today?
A number of stories. It's as if every time I blink, something happens in the world. But I think I'll share a few stories of my own, one or two. The one comes from my experience. Growing up, I used to sell in my uncle's shop. And occasionally, an old lady would come in and ask for bread, but she'd have no money to pay. And my uncle would look at me and give me this nod, almost to say, "Don't worry, we'll take care of it." And then come month end, a young boy would come running in and say, "They said I must come give you this money." And then there's a book that he'd keep by the side, and then I'd take it out, and then I'd look how much change to give the child and give it back. The second story, and I'll probably keep that one short. Just on my way here, just to look at imvunulo and that sort of thing. Zulu attire, Zulu traditional attire. My word, is it expensive, relatively, but they give you a rental option. And so on my way back, I called a friend and I updated him. Hey, it costs this much, it costs that much, but there's a rental option. And he asked me an interesting question. What do they do if you rent it and don't bring it back? And I kept quiet for a second, and then I said to him, well, one of two things. My istimasam, my dignity, my pride, you name it, won't allow me not to return it. But second of all, there's Zulu, so I really don't want to find out what will happen if I don't bring it back. I can't even conceptualize it. Yeah. And so that brings me to, as you look at the world and the theme that we've had this year, Ms. Shabalalo, when it comes to root repair and trying to get to the fundamentals of finance and what finance systems are built on. I then looked at these two behaviors and I thought to myself, there really is something there about the business model of, call it integrity, call it istima, seriti, in Sepedi or Sotho. And so essentially it's that the financial system or the business model of istima, seriti.
Okay, the business model of Istima, which I'm assuming from based on what you've told us so far, is based on community, on trust.
Yep.
A huge risk, because you just gave the example of, yes, where would they even find you? That sounds like a very risky business, but also with your personal experience with working in a shop growing up and just trusting that everyone will play their part and bring the money at the end of the month. Why is this so important? Because why is community wealth so important?
Look, it's become important because we're living in a world where it's becoming more and more difficult to sustain livelihoods. We're in a situation where there's obviously rising costs of living, interest rate volatility, job uncertainty, fragile household balance sheets, the works. And half of these concepts, you and I have barely understood them, and already it's changing again. So we don't even know what it's changing to. So when the Minister of Finance explains that interest rates are going up by 0.25% or going down by 0.25%, or the fuel price, like happened last week, is going by 3 Rand, we roughly have an indication that it's good news or it's bad news. We must quickly do something or quickly not do something. But if we're to have a conversation, we barely understand what that means. And so when you consider that, especially for someone in my position where you have to design financial solutions and financial systems, you then try and think, what is it that we're missing that makes it difficult for people to relate to what is being communicated? What's the relevance of weekly or quarterly reports on these sort of indicators? You then also look at what is there that exists in society that we're missing. And in my country, at least, the biggest one that we're missing is the fact that if you go predominantly to rural areas, there is currency in a name, there is currency in community. I mean, we've got the stokvel industry is about, I think, 160 billion rands last I checked. And that's a system that is solely based on community and social, what do you call it, social accountability. But it's also a huge pot of money that we never bring into the formal economy and use it for long-term capital build and long-term capital expenditure. And part of the reason, I think, is because some of these concepts have not been formalized and brought into the lexicon of formal finance jargon.
And at the moment, without them being formalized, what advantages are there to this type of community wealth? I mean, why don't I just take care of my family, and then if I need any further assistance, then do it formally through a bank, or any type of lender, for example, if you want to borrow money. Why is social capital, why is community capital so important?
Well, the first reason why, and really I'm off the spot on the spot of this one, it's because it's a truer cost of capital. So that's a very it's a very popular finance term, pricing risk, how we come up with your individual interest rate when you go borrow money from a bank. It's called the 3 C's of credit analysis or whatever. When you go to the bank, they look at three things. It's your character, your capacity, and capital. So they're looking at, do you have a previous record of honoring your debts? Then they'll be looking, that's character. Capacity, they look at, can you repay the debt? So they'll probably look at your income to cost ratio, income to expenses. And then the last one is, in the event that you fail to pay the capital, what can we do to recover that money? So do you have assets that you're putting up as collateral? Now, the best that we can do in this country oftentimes is prime or prime plus 3.5% or prime plus 2% for the majority of South Africans, which is unaffordable. And it's unrealistic because it's also not a true cost. The reality, once again, as I say, Gwamai, if they're willing to rent me a whole 55,000 Rand outfit, what's the risk that they're taking on? And they have calculated that you're unlikely to default on the payment and bringing back the piece of attire that they've borrowed you. And I think it works because there's a truer cost or a more correct calculation of my cost of capital. Why? They'll be looking at the fact that, well, obviously from a financial perspective, if I don't bring it back, then it's 55,000 rands that they've lost, right? But also, it's my name. Oftentimes, people that come and borrow a piece of clothing worth that amount for a traditional ceremony, it's probably linked to a family name or a family event that is going on. And kuzowaziwa back home that, hey, one of your kids, Le Goli, stole from maybe my kid. And that is actually part of character. It just maybe doesn't form part of the formal finance system in terms of character because they would just start with me and the last 6 payments that I've made. But you're seeing instruments like Vitality that are actually trying to model behavior and quantify it and bring it on board. So, yeah.
When it comes to financial systems, because that's very interesting that you say that. I know that, years ago, maybe when our parents, for example, were younger, or grandparents, a name meant so much.
Yeah.
But to use that now as part of a financial system or a financial model still seems a bit risky to me. Now, our guest that we are going to be speaking to after our conversation with you is the CEO of Mutualism, and they do alternative funding. So moving away from, traditional funding systems like banks, for example.
Yeah.
And what you are saying, of course, very different from what they do, but you are, making an emphasis on reputation, for example, identity, social credibility within a community. Is there still space for something like that now in 2026? Because if you go Gwamai, what are the chances that if I borrow a tire for 55,000 Rand, for example, that they would know my family? I understand how it could have worked back then, but is there a place for it now? Is it not a huge risk, Lisa Fisher?
There's an interesting joke, law enforcement doesn't work until it's looking for you. So
Very
I think
true.
it's one of those.
Very
You find
true,
out
yeah.
that South Africa is a very small place once you step on a Zulu person's shoe. There definitely is a place for that, Ms. Shabalala. I mean, for a number of reasons, just by looking at some of the economic factors that I did look at. I don't know who's going to call it. I don't know who's going to finally admit that as a world, we are failing to solve our inequality issues. South Africa, for the last 20 years at least, has been continuously ranked as the most unequal society in the world. Those are statistics and factors that someone eventually has to call it and say, you know what, our systems are failing, you know. It might be the best that we had when we were designing them. It might even be the best that we have the terminology to define. And I think that's why segments like these are important, because we do have other systems that perhaps do work, be it in silos, be it in much bigger scales. For example, in China, in Japan, you've got the concept called Guanji, which is family honor, and those are global economies. China is currently overtaking. I mean, the war in the Strait of Hamas, a lot of it has to do with the fact that the US is being overtaken as a global superpower. So the relevance that capitalism and democracy has had, based solely on economic indicators, is being challenged by alternative systems. I'll admit they're not pure systems in that it's not purely be it a communist or this Guanzi concept, but I'm arguing then that we don't have to also implement purely capitalism and then exclude the rest of what the country is practicing. So there definitely is relevance for it in our country, let alone our continent.
Okay, this year you are dealing with our ethics and our morals. It's
Listen,
not just finances.
listen.
You're really making sure
Yeah.
that we not only,
Yeah.
make money, but we spend it the right way. So with this type of system, obviously, I'm just going to speak hypothetically,
Yeah.
with regards to how you think it would be formalized. But before we get to that, we spoke about behavior and how behavior matters more in this type of system more than income, and you gave the example of Vitality. And most of us know how Vitality works. They encourage good behavior and you get
Yeah.
the rewards.
Yeah.
With a financial system, how would you see that playing out? What kind of behavioral patterns would you be looking at?
Look, for starters, before I even answer the question, I would like to actually emphasize it's not new, by the
Okay.
way.
Mm.
We just maybe have not had the tools to capture a lot of that behavior, right? I'll give you an example. I thought of the concept already 8 years ago, but there was no chat GPT back then. So even just to discuss it or bounce it off someone was limited. Versus now I can just sit down and discuss it with ChatGPT and it gives me statistics. So it gives me what are the most common surnames, how prevalent are they. So there's 250,000 Khosas or Chauges or Shabalalas or Mukwenas, you name it. So that's from the statistical and the hardcore technical factors.
Mhm.
All of those are already being tracked by your use of social media, by the banks themselves, by financial systems. For the last 10 years, we've been hearing that data is the biggest, is the new oil. So I can guarantee you, as of today, almost every facet of your life. I mean, that's why you get recommended ads on your social media, on your Instagram. Your TikTok is curated to you. You have a conversation, and then you've got advertised. So this information is there, it exists. What we don't have is someone that sits down in something like a bank, for example, or a mutual insurance company and says, what pieces of data we're not putting together to design our products that if we sat down and actually put together, we would actually do more business, because that's actually what it is. We would lend out more money, still at lower risk. I mean, I used to run township venture capital, what do you call it, business. And the lending amount was, I think, 5,000 rands to 20,000 rands. And in one of the investment committee meetings, someone raised the point, what if somebody runs away with the capital? And the logical question to ask was, where will you go with 5,000 rands? Like, you're barely going to make it out the country. Then you back to your community, to your township. The township is not scary anymore. The villages are not remote and unidentifiable anymore. So oftentimes what we call risk is often fear. And I think that's what we started, in fact, the year on. The fact that we've taken fear and we've financialized it, and then we've started then putting a price to what if it does fail. Currently, if you fail to pay your debt, your credit record gets impacted. And a large amount of South Africans are saying, well, I don't care. Why? Because they still care about their family name. That's why the stokvel industry is still going so strong. We do have the jokes of people that run away with stokvel money, but on the main, it survives. Exactly, it survives because people do care that I don't want my family name to be associated with having let down a stokvel.
And speaking of stokvels, you're actually just reminding me of something. You're right, this does already exist.
Yeah.
I know examples within the taxi industry.
Yeah.
And within the taxi industry, it works for the same reason.
Yeah.
As you said, if you go Guamai, those are not people that you would like to cross or be on their bad side. But reputation does matter, amongst other things, within the taxi industry. So it has been done informally.
Yeah.
How do we formalize it? Are you coming up with something to formalize this type of system?
Look, for conversation's sake, I'm not.
Okay.
But as a business, that's my life work. I think that's why I've done this for the past year or 2 years with you. Discuss the different types of finance problems or challenges or things that make headlines. It is something that I hope on my deathbed I can say, look, we solved that problem. But for today, I'm not. But I mean, as I say, there's a lot of technologies that are capturing behavior. So the challenge is a lot less difficult for me than it was 8 years ago. Vitality already tracks a lot of your health type behavior, your consistency, that's character, that sort of stuff. Your Facebook and social media already track your social circles, your behavior around that environment. And I don't want to get too dark because then you hear about what perhaps is being done, global Black Mirror in China with that sort of stuff. But the at least the tools now are available to track the factors or the items that such a model would depend on. It's a matter of putting it together, and yeah, you can do it. Products like these that are coming up, where you're starting to get a lot more alternative banking, revenue-based banking, that sort of thing, it is an extension of these things being built out there. Yeah.
And there's so many data points now. I know, a company that I heard of a few years ago that was using data from airtime purchases, for example.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you run out of airtime, you're able to have an airtime advance. And that was, one of the things that they were using. And you're right, years ago, this would have been really difficult to do. But now we have the resources, we have the tools. And I hope financial institutions are going to come on board. They have done a great job with stokvels, trying to bank the unbanked and, trying to fill that missing middle gap. But there's still so much more that can be done. And just as we end off very quickly, I've mentioned one principle that you think is, could make this work, that you think is important, which is behavior. But you have a few other principles. Can you just quickly give us those principles? I think you have 5 principles.
Yeah. The first one is identity as an asset. And that doesn't start with me. That has always been there for time immemorial. We just perhaps have had a more loose relationship with it lately, right? Where it doesn't matter what I do online with my name, with my behavior. Go back to believing in your name. Go back to believing in your identity and see it as an asset. Today, you might not be able to take a loan out with it, but tomorrow, trust me, we're working hard to build the systems that allow you to do that. The next one is trust. Trust reduces loss of capital or cost of capital. So if I know that I can recover my funds from you, from your reputation in the community, from, in some instances, your family members that will chip in, I am willing to borrow you money at a lower interest rate. Then community as a risk buffer. The more you can demonstrate that you're not an island, that it's not me, myself, and I, which is very prevalent in the current economy, or at least lifestyle systems, the more you can show that I belong to a community, your church selfies, your gym videos, that sort of thing, it does reduce your risk to a lender, because we know then that if we are unable to reach you, we can maybe go to the gym and have a conversation with you there. Behavior matters more than income. And I think we've had that a lot where people ask, I've been renting for 10, 20 years, yet the bank still says I'm a risk for a bond. That's behavior that shows you actually can commit to a debt for 10, 20 years. So that's behavior that shows that income is not necessarily the best indicator of your ability to maintain a bond. Um, and then the final one is accountability, being better than collateral. So I can take your laptop and lend you 2,000 rands, or I can have a look at again your Instagram ka Easter, ka December when you have to go home and realize that Shabalala, when she has to go home, she's worried about that one aunt that she has to account to. She must take out her tongue ring, she must hide her tattoos, that sort of thing. That's accountability, and that often does tell a lot more, or at least guarantee a debt a lot more than collateral may. If then I, as a bank, know that, oh, okay, if you default on this one, ngizotshela u-Anbanibani ukuthi you are not paying your debts njengoba uhleli lapho eGoli. So yeah, those are some of the principles I think that we can start to look at in a system like this.
Sure, all I heard was trust, 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 trust. Because that is really what you need.
Istima.
That is exactly
Yes.
what you need. Just we are ending business wrap right now, but there's something that is very important that you said, and every time you speak, we always take notes. We usually take notes yesterday. I'm taking notes right now, but and it's not even related to our conversation. You can apply it in any area of your life. You said go back to believing in your name.
Yeah.
I hope if you are listening, you heard that. Go back to believing in your name, not just with your finances, but just in general.
Yeah.
Believe in your name. But that is how we end Business Wrap today with Lesakhisha Mtiane. Thank you so much. If you missed that conversation, it really was about true wealth, community wealth, and how we don't really just need to measure it in currency, but it can also be measured in trust and accountability. We are going to take a quick break, and when we do come back, it is time for Business Breakthrough.